At what point do you settle? When do you say, I've worked hard enough and improved enough and perfection isn't realistic, so I'm ready to settle for the situation as it is? Well, I've gone back into the retirement psychology books from the Inner Work library, including these two books, which I'll explain in a moment, and two more bonus books, which I'll flash just after flashing these books on the screen. You get what we do on this channel. We talk about psychology books and giving you psychology ideas and videos that are practical and theoretical, and we are going to solve this question once and for all. The introduction is over, let's get down to business. What do you mean by settle? Truly, when you say, should I just settle down, what do you actually mean by that? Life in general, at the very least, is broken into health, wealth, and relationships. Health is subdivisioned into physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual health. Wealth is subdivisioned into the amount of money in your bank and also your career, your profession, and your vocation, at the very least. And relationships are subdivisioned into family, romance, God, and yourself. At least 4 categories there. So health, wealth, and relationships. From my perspective as a coach of the last 5 years, when someone's saying that they want to settle down, I can't take them at their word. You don't mean settle down. What you likely mean is settling one of these 3 lanes into a state of maintenance mode. Hopefully you mean settling it into maintenance mode. It's a fallacy to imagine that you could ever settle down and stop trying. Any lane of life, whether it's health, wealth, or relationships, any of the subdivisions within those 3 categories, they need to be maintained lest they fall into decay and entropy. Your romantic relationship, for example, cannot merely be settled. It needs to be maintained with consistent energy and attention over time. Your career and your profession, it can't just be settled. There's always a pull and a give and a take, a pull and a throw, a give and a take, a language here and a language there. You always need to maintain something. You get the idea, right? There's no such thing as settling. What we mean when we use that language, generally speaking, is I am okay with not pushing forwards towards a dream or an ambition or a deep aspiration inside of myself, or I've maybe reached the age, maybe in your 50s or your 60s, where you're not going to push another big challenge up the hill. This is why I went back into retirement psychology. However, retirement psychology is crucial here because if you're going to find an answer to the question of when is it time to basically give up on dreams and ambitions, you need to be aware of the likely scenario of giving up a little bit too early, or maybe not having the awareness that you can settle in one lane, but you should keep at least one lane, ideally 2 lanes, still open for growth. What happens if you settle across all 3 simultaneously? You dig in for maintenance mode and maybe decay and entropy in health, wealth, and relationships. You'll maintain just enough health to get by, but settle the fact that your career and your vocation and your creative pursuits are going towards decay, and your personal relationship to yourself, your spouse, and your relationship to God, that's also something, whatever, I'm just going to give up on. I'm not going to feed it. I'm not going to feed it with energy. What do you think will happen? One of the classic things that happens, especially at the point of retirement, which is mainly on the health and the wealth front, sometimes relationships, but primarily wealth, literal money, vocation, career, the main thing that people do for decades in their life. One of the main things that happens, quoting from this book, is a state of apathy and depression. Basically, when you settle too early or too universally, and I don't want this to happen to you. Quoting from the book, an archetypally representative, sad retirement quote. Someone said, I absolutely hate it. This is someone who's recently retired, maybe a few months in. I absolutely hate it. I find it financially challenging, lonely, and boring. I feel as though I am brain dead and I am being left further and further behind in learning new technologies and discovering new interests. I find I am sinking into apathy, and the less I do, the less I want to do. The reason I chose this quote from a really wonderful introduction on the psychology of retirement is that final line. Please pay attention. If you're in a bit of a trance state right now, you're not really paying attention. That final line, if you're thinking of settling in your health, your wealth, or your relationships, I find I am sinking into apathy. And the less I do, the less I want to do. This is indicating the downward snowball that will fall towards decay and entropy. You can never just settle. If you don't maintain, at the very least, if you don't maintain, the less you do will mean the less you want to do. That is not necessarily destiny, however, because I've got a counterexample from this wonderful book by Priscilla Long, Dancing with the Muse in Old Age. And the introduction to this book is a meta-introduction on the success of successful retirement, or at least beginning another endeavor in your older years. Why is that? Because Priscilla was age 79 at the time of writing this book, and this is an extract for the other timeline of possibility. The timeline of possibility where you settle one lane of life, for example, settling your financially lucrative career, or settling the fact that maybe you're a widower who won't have another partner for the rest of your life, or maybe you're content with your single partner. You've decided to stop looking for alternatives, you've done your shadow work and your inner work, you've gotten over pornography addiction or some kind of fantasy escapism, you didn't have your midlife affair, whatever it might be. You got through that, and now you're at the stage of settling your relationship. If you do settle those two, but you keep open your health, you might have spiritual possibility. If you settle your health and keep it maintenance mode, you might have a new creative rising and inspiration. Priscilla writes this in her introduction, Dancing with the Muse in Old Age, at age 79. This book works against ageism for creativity. It reflects the new ways of looking at old age as a potentially dynamic and productive time full of connections to others and deeply satisfying work. There's the relationships and the work lane, right? The relationships and the wealth. Whether paid or unpaid, that's the work. It offers numerous models of people who grew to be very old, that's the health, while also living remarkably creative, wealth, and productive lives. Some were able-bodied, others were disabled in one way or another. And then the book, at length, basically goes into a variety of examples of people who in their 70s, 80s, and 90s didn't settle. They didn't settle for less. If I were to go into self-actualization psychology, Abraham Maslow, one of my favorite names on this channel, Abraham Maslow would say, quite confidently, that the truly self-actualizing individual, if self-actualization is treated as a process of evolution rather than an endpoint that we get to, the self-actualizing individual needs self-actualizing work, fulfillment, vocation, or profession to maintain that self-actualizing state of consciousness. You need not be working for a lot of money. You need not be working a lot of hours. You need not be in a prestigious job that gives you status and networking opportunities. You can settle those things, but don't settle the entire lane of wealth. Don't do it. Today's questioner said, when do you say I've worked hard enough and improved enough and perfection isn't realistic, so I'm ready to settle for the situation as is? You might be in maintenance mode, but if maintenance mode leads towards closing something down, make sure that you leave a window open. You can bolt the front door. You can board up the back door. You can bolt down and latch up every single window in your home and settle for no more fresh air. But you better leave a breeze somewhere, otherwise you will suffocate. Pretty dark metaphor to bring out of nowhere, but I'm sometimes a dark metaphor kind of person. If you want an alternative take, before I give you some final practical advice for this video, I've got 2 books targeted specifically towards men and women on the question of retirement psychology and basically getting to a point of inner acceptance of settling either your health, I'm getting older, I'm no longer as strong and fit as I used to be, your wealth, it's time to retire, it's time to not push forwards, I'm not going to be the businessman or businesswoman that I wanted to be, settling that, or your relationships, something's happened personally, I'm not going to go and do whatever it might be. There's 2 books I want you to potentially consider. The first one, The Croning Years, and the second one, What Aging Men Want. Which book do you think is recommended for the women, and which book do you think is recommended for the men? Maybe the front one there with the flowers on the front, and this 4th or 5th century Greek hoplite helmet gives it away. I think that's a 5th century hoplite helmet. Yeah, I think that's 5th century. It's 5th century, but also it's not the most common form of hoplite helmet because you wouldn't necessarily have so much plumage and adoration if you were going into combat. It's very much the classic clip art that you'd expect on What Aging Men Want, which is the Odyssey as a parable for male aging. I won't get full to it. I mean, I picked it up for a reason, but this book is also fantastic, and for even better reasons, that this speaks more to the inner feminine, this speaks more to the inner masculine, and guess what? If you're a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. I recommend that you read both of them. But they're very different in style. One is grandmotherly, the other is grandfatherly. Throughout these books, the very best of the retirement psychology books, the same advice is given time after time. If you want to avoid the apathetic, depressive example that I quoted at the beginning of this video, the person who is bored by life, the less they do, the less they want to do. If you want to avoid that kind of life, you need to keep at least one major lane of your life open for growth and expansion. You can settle 2 out of the 3. You can say, all right, I've pushed far enough in my business. I accept I'm just going to keep myself active enough and move just enough to not get sick. But you better expand in your relationships. You can keep your relationships on the down low. You can keep your health again, just something that you want to maintain, but you better keep your wealth open. You better find a way to bring up a new hobby and make some money from it, or have a creative community project that feels like a job and a profession. You get what I'm saying here? I've tried to, as quickly as possible, give you the essence of about a dozen retirement psychology books that I've read, and 4 that I recommend you read right now. If you are mentally checking out from any lane of life, that is not a failure. But what is a tragedy waiting to happen is to check out of all the lanes of life at once. If you want a final nuanced point to end the video, as I mentioned at the very start of this discussion, health breaks down into physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Relationships break down into relationships with family members and friends, also yourself, and also to God. You can settle certain areas of life at certain seasons of life, but just make sure that you've got a plan or at least an awareness to return back when the timing is right. For example, in this stage of my life, I'm really prioritizing my physical health because at the start of this year, I was prioritizing my spiritual health. At the start of the year, I was reading a lot of Christian mystics and spending a lot of time in meditative walks. Now, for this season, in the middle of the summer, I'm working out every day in my home gym. My spiritual health has been settled in terms of maintaining, not degrading, but maintaining. I'm still reading and being in contact with spiritual ideas, but nowhere near the same quantity of expansion that I did back in January and February. But my physical health is taking priority. I'm maintaining over here, but I wouldn't take on the mentality that I'm settling, because I know that more growth is on the way. Today's questioner once again said, at what point do you settle? When do you say enough is enough? A high-level invitation to structure your settling across the health, wealth, and relationships over multiple years is to consider the idea that you're going to temporarily settle one lane of life so that you can expand another with an awareness that you will come back when the timing is right. This could be, for example, someone who's going through a divorce. They understand and they settle, not with a sense of permanence, I will never remarry, but they say, you know what, for the next 5 years, I'm not going to focus on dating. I'm going to focus on the kids, if you have kids, or I'm going to focus on work and my spiritual life, or maybe my health and fitness. I could give a dozen different, made-up examples on the spot from the different categories being prioritized, but I think you get the point now. I've re-emphasized one point over and over again. You can never settle. It would always lead to decay and entropy if you don't at the very least maintain some degree of vitality in all of these 3 lanes. Don't settle. Do temporarily maintain certain areas of life, but make sure that you have at least one lane open in a meaningful and inspiring way. Otherwise, once again, I will re-emphasize, I know it's boring, I know it's repetitive, I will re-emphasize having read a lot of sad retirement psychology stories, a lot of books that quote repeatedly the same kind of structure of bad retirement versus good retirement. You don't need to be in your 70s or 80s to have the regret of a falsely retired life where you feel like you didn't do enough, or you feel like you're no longer occupied or engaged with life because you were doing so much and you prematurely checked out. That can happen in your 30s or your 40s. You can have that moment of feeling like you're checking out from your love life, feeling like you're checking out from your physicality, checking out from your desire to build wealth and go up another level in terms of living in a dream environment, or maybe having something that would mean a lot to you materially. Don't settle too soon. If it's a season of low energy, make sure you've got an area of life where that energy can become a flywheel of motivation and inspiration, and know that in time, in the right timing, in the right season, you'll have extra energy to put into the other lanes of life. Ultimately, my advice for the question of today, when do you know when to settle? I don't recommend it. Some of my oldest clients are in their 70s. When they've come to work with me, they don't end up in my mentoring sessions, 4-month mentorships, in a settling mentality. They don't. Because they're not settling, they're finding a new way to expand and a new way to grow, and I'm pretty sure that Abraham Maslow would be very proud of every elderly wise man or woman that may have settled their relationships, they may have settled their career, but they're prioritizing their mental life, their spiritual life, and that creative spark within. You should never settle in this life. There's always something more to find out. There's always something more to create. There's always more love to feel. There's beauty around every corner. It doesn't need to be every corner that you search, but make sure, at the very least, you're keeping a curiosity to be on the hunt and keep looking out for opportunities. In new ways, inspiring ways, ways that you haven't looked out for before. If you're uninspired right now, don't call it quits on everything. I'll see you in the comments.